This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy, Adam Emmert, as we are closing in. Shoot, Adam, the season started. We had football on Thursday night for the Hall of Fame game. I didn't watch it because, as is tradition for me, I don't care much about the Hall of Fame game, but I guess there was some interesting new kickoffs that folks got to see. But I'm more interested in Seahawks football. It's not quite here yet, but football season is in fact here.
It is here. Training camp definitely lets you know about that. And the Seahawks not too far away from their first preseason game. They have a mock game, I believe, tomorrow at Lumen. That'll be interesting to hear the news that comes out of there. But honestly, Brandon, today, as I'm thinking about the news from the Seahawks and the things that are going on, the thing that stands out the most is we just dodged our first major camp bullet with Geno Smith, and color me relieved.
I am a little bit relieved because the news that we got on Thursday, it sent me into a little bit of a panic. It was Greg Bell out on X at Greg Bell Seattle saying, well, and this was coming straight from the coach, right? As McDonald said that he had to go see imaging to see a doctor and he was out for practice. And then he used the term, and maybe this was Greg's term, saying that Geno was out indefinitely after missing 2 straight practices. And so when you see that, out indefinitely, missed 2 straight practices. Now, I had one question of why are we just now getting imaging? If it were serious to start with, they would have imaged it right away. But we got the all clear on Wednesday from Seahawks insider Adam Schefter saying that Geno Smith's knee and hip injuries did not reveal anything significant, and he, quote, shouldn't miss any time.
Yeah, good news. And when you heard the imaging part, yeah, that definitely sent me into a tiny panic. And then I listened to Mike McDonald's press conference shortly after that news had come out, or maybe he was the one who had broken the news. But yeah, in the press conference, he was asked about it. And, he started out that presser in what a great day, just in a great mood, super excited about the team and how things are going. And then he brings up the Geno thing, and they ask him, well, what about tomorrow? Is he going to be available tomorrow? I don't know about tomorrow. And we're starting to learn a little bit of the terminology that Mike uses to describe different things, right? Like we knew Pete speak with, well, it's legit or it's this or it's that. It sounds like nicked up is something that you don't worry about if you're a Seahawks fan when you hear Coach Mike say that sort of thing. But his overall demeanor kind of put me a little at ease because it didn't seem like a first-time head coach who had just lost his starting quarterback for the season. And to have that at least confirmed by the imaging, that feels pretty darn good because Geno tearing it up this year in training camp, supposedly.
Yeah, you hear from DK Metcalf in his interviews. You hear from even some of the defensive backs saying how on point Geno is. And yeah, if you're looking at missing any time, that was my other question, though, that he shouldn't miss any time. Or what are we talking here? Time in preseason games? Are we going to see him in the mock game on Saturday? I guess I wouldn't necessarily expect him to be out there in the mock game, but maybe if he's not missing any time, if that counts as time, then maybe we will see him in that.
Yeah, it's totally possible. It could also mean he's not going to miss any of the regular season. Either way, as long as he's there week 1, I feel pretty good about it, even though they're still installing the offense. And you hear the players talk about how intricate that it is and how much that they all have to learn individually. Just listening to Jake Bobo talk about it just today and his reaction to being a guy that has to, like all the receivers, having to learn every single position and every single route so that depending on what formation is called, they can get different dudes in different situations no matter what. And I think that sort of versatility is interesting. Maybe it would set Geno back a little bit if he did miss some time here through the preseason and stuff, but it sounds like it's not something we need to worry about.
I would like to see him in the preseason just because I want to see him operating the offense. I want to see as much of my starting quarterback and the new offensive coordinator operating at the same time together, just leading into the season, just so I can have that information. But other teams probably want that information too. And if they have an excuse that they can keep Geno out for the preseason just as a safety precaution, then maybe that's what they end up doing. It's a tough balance between what we want as fans and what makes the most sense for the team. For sure.
And look, if Geno doesn't play one preseason snap, it's probably not going to hurt my feelings other than I'd like to see it. Even though whatever version of the offense that we get during preseason, we all know that that's not the offense, right? I mean, that's year in, year out, no matter who the offensive coordinator is. So that maybe you don't glean quite as much as you'd think, even if Geno went out there. But another piece of good news that came out of the Geno injury really is the idea that the first few practices without pads, Sam Howell really struggled. And it was talked about by all the different pundits and everybody who's attended, and that the accuracy just wasn't there. And then in Geno's absence, now that the pads have come on, we've been hearing that the performance level has risen and he's gotten a little bit better and kind of taken that gap between Geno and Sam and maybe lessened it a little bit, which is great news, right? Because sometime throughout the season, if we do have to deal with Geno missing a game or three, we need Sam Howell at his best. And it's nice to hear that there's progression rather than regression.
I think there's something to that idea of being a gamer too. Like the guy who maybe doesn't always look that great, but when he comes in and he's locked in and is able to somehow perform better than in practice. And because I was kind of this way too, just in terms of public speaking. I know that we would do practices for your dry runs for even a presentation in front of class. And I had people tell me, and they're like, oh, geez, I didn't know if you were going to be able to pull it all together by the time that we had to present. And then, I'd crush it. And maybe I'm a gamer when it comes to having the cameras on and talking to people. You might not know that now from the podcast because I might be tripping over my words. But, if this really mattered, then I'd be dialed in.
Look, I've been knowing you since kindergarten, and I will say this, you are definitely a man that has the clutchy gene. Like it's in you. And I know that for sure, yes, you will rise to the occasion. I have no doubt. In regards to tripping over your words during the podcast, that's probably a me problem since I'm the one who's usually tripping over my words and then infecting you with it. So it's probably on me.
Well, the defense is getting used to a little thing called obnoxious communication, according to Mike McDonald. And I think that's how some people might describe this podcast from time to time. But It was that idea that we heard from Mike McDonald and just this past week that what he wants from the defense, he wants them to call everything that they see lining up, everything pre-snap. And they want all of the guys just calling out what they see because they're seeing all these things from their own positional perspective. We heard a little bit from Boye Mafe of what that meant for him and just how it is, for reporters hearing it, it sounds kind of chaotic, but the idea that they're all communicating in their own way and how if everybody's doing that, according to Mike McDonald, that's going to be a powerful thing for the defense and helping them do what they do.
Absolutely. One of the things that we heard a lot from KJ Wright throughout all of last season as the unofficial spokesperson for Bobby Wagner was that he was very disappointed with the communication throughout the team on defense. And he'd show multiple clips where guys aren't pointing, guys aren't talking to one another. They're just not engaged in a lot of ways. And that mental side of the game is extremely important. And then especially in a defense that's being described, and we've seen a little bit in Baltimore, obviously, right? So it's not just descriptions, it's how it's played, but being described by the players as being a defense that really shifts the picture on the offense post snap. Well, you can only do that if you guys all are on the same page of what you think the offense is going to do so that post snap, you're all rotating and going to that next look that's different and being all on the same page while you do it. And the obnoxious communication part of it, you bet, man, I'm into it. Yeah. Over communicate the hell out of it. I think it's going to make a marked difference in this defense for this next year.
I think it's good that it's something that they're focusing on then at training camp, because gosh, if they weren't putting that kind of focus on it during camp in past years, then I can see why it would end up playing its way out during the season. The thing that I wonder about, though, is that if it isn't that much of a focus in the preseason is because of just the noise level at Lumen. And when you're playing at home for all those home games, how much it makes it difficult then on the defense when the opposing offense is operating. It makes it hard for them to communicate. It makes it hard for your own defense to communicate. So how are they then going to translate that into those same types of issues while they're on defense and playing at home?
Well, it's going to have to be the nonverbal stuff. And you've heard them, all the different players and the different coaches talk about it. It's not just the verbal, it's the nonverbal. And unfortunately, there's only one player on the Seahawks roster that knows sign language, and that's DK Metcalf, and he plays on offense. So I think the next big step for this defense is to send everybody to American Sign Language classes and get that on lockdown. Can you imagine how much more effective they'd be if they could all get out there and just talk with their hands? Like, that'd be impressive.
I suppose you don't need to know the official ASL signs to be able to communicate with hand signals and that sort of things, because I suppose you would want to do some kind of shorthand, but I suppose that's similar to what defenses do in the past anyway. It's just that it brought up that concern for me that you spend all this time practicing the way that you want to play, and then you get into those situations where, it's not going to work as necessarily as you practice it. But I suppose just like the offense practices going through, their situations where it's noisy and they can't communicate verbally. Yeah, they got to do it on defense.
Sure. I think there's going to be a lot of different things, whether it's offense or defense. I mean, just the team as a whole that is being practiced now and planned out now and brought to week 1 to week 4, that when they get out on the field, they're going to go, oh, that doesn't quite work. We need to tweak this. It's the first run. It's the first season of this brand new coaching staff with guys in brand new positions in terms of, coordinators and head coach and all of that. And I think that there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. That doesn't mean that the team itself starts out necessarily slow in terms of wins and losses, but I can't imagine it's going to look nearly as clean in week 4 as it's going to in week 9.
No, because just as the players are learning how to communicate with one another, that's the other thing that I don't know if we've emphasized all that much throughout the offseason, but a lot of times, and it was one of the things that we liked about pulling all these coaches together, is that you got a diverse group of coaches from all over the league. And it's that way you're hoping that you're getting some of the best guys. But at the same time, they're also guys that haven't worked together and communicated with one another. And so there's a lot of those things that, you don't necessarily know how it's going to go because they don't have that level of familiarity. And so on that side, it is maybe a little bit of a step back, but you hope that this group can all gel together then, just like any team. And on the coaching side, be able to, practice what they preach in terms of communication.
100%. And look, if it is a little rough out of the gate because of some of these issues of just newness, that's not even necessarily a step back in my mind. It's just a part of the journey that we're going to have to take with this new coaching staff and the new look Seahawks and everything like that. I said when Coach Mike was hired, I was like, I'm giving this at least 2 years before I make a referendum on how things are going. Same with Grubb, right? Like when I've talked about Grubb, if it looks awesome in the first 10 weeks, or if, let's say it looks terrible in the first 10 weeks, I'm definitely not going to be out there being like, see, told you, totally right. Like,
I don't know. Get it together. I kind of feel like you might be, but okay.
Absolutely not. The best I can say at that point is, well, it's trending this way, but we're not going to know answers about all of this for about another year and 7 months. By that time, like we get to about this point, after 2 years, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with, or at least have a much better idea.
But there's going to be people out there that after 6 games they think they're going to know exactly what's
100%.
happening with this team.
Right. So if one of my official predictions, this is a teaser for our expectations show that we are going to record next week. I do believe the offense itself is probably going to start fast.
Oh,
that's a guess. Now, with that said, by week 7, if it's looking great, I don't want to hear a bunch of people, you're a moron. You were totally wrong on this. Yes, definitely trending that way. If that's the way it's looking by week 7, no doubt about it. We'll see by the end of year 2, good or bad. We got to give this regime the time it needs to really put its stamp on this thing. And that's an exciting part of it. The part of the change and the newness.
It's that similar reason, I guess I'll give my little teaser too, is that I think the defense is going to start relatively slow in those first 6 weeks because of these communication type issues. Like, for one thing, it's one thing to change like how much and how frequently you communicate it, how your teammates understand it. You're going to end up working through some of those mistakes of where you have somebody saying, well, I saw it this way, and that's why I made this particular call. And then you have to, it's going to take some time, I think, to learn from those mistakes if you aren't right on point every single game. So I think that is going to ultimately lead to a slower start for the defense out of the gate.
I have some evidence that either supports or takes that down a little bit or a notch or two. I have an opinion on this that may agree, it may disagree. But either way, we are going to talk about it on the Season Expectations show, because I think at this point we're getting to that place that we can be like, okay, I can feel for who the starters are going to be. I know what this roster is looking like. I've heard enough about the scheme and all that to put a stamp on it and be like, this is my best crystal ball guess as to how this is going to go.
That was the most hardcore teaser I've ever heard from you, as you gave a completely non-answer teaser of what you're bringing to the show next week.
Well, I'm not going to lie. The last few weeks in politics has been really interesting, like with everything that's gone on. And so I've ended up watching a bit more of that than I normally do. Normally, I don't watch any of that nonsense. And I think maybe it rubbed off on me. I gave you a very political answer.
Maybe I'll have an answer for you. Maybe I won't. Maybe it'll support your argument. Maybe it'll take it down. You'll just have to tune in and find out.
Yeah. So be there for that show, Brandon, so that you can find out.
I think I will be there, even though I'm going to be away from Montana for the next few weeks, or not next few weeks, but the next few days. When I get back, I'll hopefully have some information from being at one of the training camps next week that I can bring a little information from there. And also, come back and refreshed from a short vacation.
Heck yeah. No, looking forward to what you see and some of your observations and all that. That's going to be super cool. And hopefully we'll be seeing Geno out there on the field, or you'll be seeing Geno out there on the field. And this, little mini pod that we put out about staying calm and just kind of relaxing, will hold true.
And if you want to help support the show, you can go to getintheflock.com. Any donations that come in here in the next week, you'll get on our Podiversary episode next week, the Season Expectation Show. It's an annual tradition on the Seahawkers podcast. It started out as episode number 1, and it's going to be episode, 438, our 11th Season Expectations show. We've been doing this a while, and if you want to be part of that show, be recognized as a member of the flock, getintheflock.com.
Heck yeah, man. Look forward to hearing everything that you guys have to say regarding that show coming up. And congratulations on 11 years, buddy. This has been it's been a fun journey.
It has been a heck of a journey. And I think with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.